Let me just maybe give it a little bit of an overview. So the root chakra is about issues, traditionally it's said it's about issues of the tribe, our family, our roots, where we come from, what we bring into this life. And I would say, like a baby is held by the mother. A baby is ideally, right, held by the mother, trusting the mother, being loved unconditionally for, where is, who was I having this conversation with? Yeah, it was you, Kelly. You were talking about being loved for who I really am, being loved for my authentic self. So ideally, I mean, there's so much dysfunction in our world, right? But ideally, a baby is held on the lap of the mother and just loved, unconditionally accepted for who that baby is. And so that creates a foundation of trust in the heart of the baby. So I believe that the root chakra is about harmonizing trust. So then just to give a little bit of an overview, so then the next chakra, the second chakra, is about, well, let me say, I wonder if I should go into that now. It's about, okay, so trust. The baby doesn't have to do anything. Baby doesn't have to perform, say anything, be wonderful. It's just, in India they have this saying that when a mother has a blind child, she calls him Padma Lochan. Where's Sharmila? There you are. Padma Lochan, which means everybody knows this child is blind, but to the mother is like lotus eyes. So that kind of unconditional love, so that's the trust of the root chakra, ideally. And then the next chakra is the sacral chakra. We'll go into each one of these in the coming days. But the next one is about when the baby begins to recognize other people besides me. I'm not the only one in the world. So and the baby begins to imitate language. They hear the mama and the papa saying, dada, mama, dada, and the parents are so it's about creating language or recognizing other life forms. It's about creativity, and it's about partnerships, relationships. I think Ashley was saying this earlier. And then the third chakra goes into harmonizing a self-confidence when the baby's a little bigger. So first of all, the baby's just being held in trust. Second of all, the baby begins to speak a little bit bigger. Then third of all, there's a self-confidence. The baby begins to act. So, if a baby's just with the mother all the time and doesn't grow to interact with peers, then that's a dysfunctional situation where so the baby begins to grow up a little self-confidence, interacts with peers, friends, plays, begins to act, right? That's the beginning of the self-confidence of the third chakra. The ego issues, self-confidence, being able to act, and then going into, this is just a little quick overview. So then the fourth chakra is called the heart chakra. That's when the baby begins to think, to appreciate, to feel some reciprocation. And it's the love chakra. So we'll go in, again, more details. And then the fifth chakra is called the throat chakra, harmonizing constructive communication. So beginning first, then appreciating, then being able to contribute some communication or contribute something like an adolescent would begin to, first of all, think and maybe challenge, but then also begin to contribute. And then the sixth chakra is about harmonizing intuition. It's called the third eye, learning some intuition in how do I communicate, how do I appreciate. And then the seventh chakra is about, I'm giving a very bhakti slant to all this. I don't know if you've ever heard it like this. Maybe I'm just kind of coming at it from my own way. But the seventh chakra, I would say, is about understanding the unity of all living beings and trying to contribute that every one of my actions is a holy sacrament. So we'll go into that in more detail, but let's go back to the first chakra. So yeah, I feel like every one of these, so our topic in this retreat is the gifts of the feminine voice. So I feel like this kind of excavation or evolution of our voice is essential to excavating or finding that gift, that treasure of the feminine voice. So maybe it doesn't come so automatically, but when bhakti is a cultivation, right? When we try to cultivate, then these things can become more clearly understood. So excavating, finding out the gifts of that, what are the treasures of that voice? What are my contributions to the world? What can my voice, what knowledge or intuition or, feminine beauty, and what can we contribute to the world as women on the path of bhakti? Bhakti means, Prabhupada always translates bhakti as devotional service. So it's love in action, I would say. It's love it's loving action as an offering to Krishna. But we get stuck in these different, I think they're triggers, and we get stuck in these different chakras, right? So another thing is that the path of bhakti is meant, as we cultivate chanting the holy name and serving in bhakti, it's meant to help us give up false designations, even a false designation that I'm a woman in a sense, but there is a softness to a woman's feminine voice. So personally, I don't want to give that up completely, but I just want to have it be excavated to understand the treasure that it really is, because I think that so many people practicing bhakti, maybe many of you share this idea, so many are just dwelling in the headspace. So I feel like we have a special gift to bring it down. Like what was Ashley was talking about, some of these herbs just sink us down. So sinking us down to the heart space, I think is very, but at the same time it's helping us give up our shadow selves, which are triggers to the lower self. So each one of these chakras, they're hooks and triggers and invitations at the same time, to invitations to our higher self, triggers for our lower self, and I believe that bhakti is really about transformation from our lower self to begin to hear the dictations of our higher self. So I'm going to describe each one. Each one has a color, a pull, an invitation, and then I'll hope to share some maybe poetry or stories that come up for me. And then I'm going to pause to let you reflect, and then we can have our discussion. So how does that sound? That sound all right? Okay. So anything that pops up to you as significant, please write it down, because sometimes when we get to that point of discussion, we just all draw a blank. So please note down anything that inspires you. And again, there's no right or wrong here. It's about what comes up for you. And I loved what Ashley was so wisely sharing, that each one of these herbs, which were much too subtle for me, but each one, when it mixes with our own personal DNA or chemistry, it just comes out in a different way. So you each may have, just as with those fragrances, we had different impressions. Some people said woody, some people said this or that. So we each may have different impressions here. So let's begin with this Muladhara chakra or root chakra. It's called the tribal chakra. Some of us have a very beautiful experience with the tribe that we come from. Some of us have a difficult experience with our tribe. I wanted to share this. I don't want to forget to say this, because where is Leslie? Okay, so Leslie's been in a Wisdom of the Sages group with my dear friends Madhvacharya and Kunti. Kunti comes from Ethiopia, and they have this beautiful tribal custom there that when someone has addiction or trauma, they all actually physically gather around that person who's been acting out really. They physically gather and they feel, and they actually kind of communicate to the person, where have we failed you? that you've had to go to heroin or alcohol or whatever it is. Where has our tribe, where has our community failed you? And it's very, very powerful. Even when someone has a tragic death, their grieving process is so much more holistic and smooth because of that powerful community. So it's not pointing the finger like you loser or whatever. So I think that's really beautiful to mention. So this root chakra, it's about the Mother Earth, rooting us to Mother Earth, as Ashley was saying. It's located at the base of the spine, the coccyx, is that how you say it? Coccyx. It's the foundation of our mental and emotional health. Like sometimes we hear that if a baby hasn't had a secure environment, until the age of 2 or 3, they're just pieces missing that they can't get in later life. So, of course, but through healing and through practice and cultivation, we can correct those lacks. But it's about the foundation of mental and emotional health, starting in the family, in the early environment. And it's about lessons that we learn in the material world. And again, harmonizing trust, coming to a place of trust beyond fear. The baby needs to trust, to be held, to be loved for who she is, for her authentic self. That holding needs to be there, and that love needs to be there. It's about family, tribe, security, finances, my physical needs, my need for logic, order, structure, perceiving the world through my 5 senses in time and space. It's that voice which might come from even before this very birth, the voice of my family, my tribe, my ethnic community. This is the way we do it, this is the way we do it in this family, and that's just the way it is. However, it may be functional, it may be dysfunctional, right? The tribes we form as co-workers, the tribal bonds we have with friends. Many people in the younger generations, their tribal bonds are more with their peers. Sometimes we're hearing this these days. They have more resonance with their peers than they have with their own families, right? So yeah. Fears may be fear of physical survival, abandonment by the group, pain of being excluded, loss of physical order, tribal prejudice. Like, we had one man in our community from an Indian family. We invited him to our Vaishnav Muslim dialogue, and he was shocked. He said, I was raised my whole life to hate those people. I was raised my whole life to hate them. How can I be in that dialogue? So, something very, very deep, And Carl Jung, the great psychologist Carl Jung, once said that the group mind is the lowest form of consciousness because individuals involved in a negative group action rarely, if ever, can accept responsibility for their personal role and actions. For example, the Nazis who were on trial at Nuremberg. Well, I was just following orders. Well, you are acting like a subhuman. No, I was just following orders. So what are the strengths of this root chakra? The strengths may be family identity, bonding, support and loyalty, the power of sharing a moral and ethical code that's been handed down generation to generation. It's the honor code that connects me to a sense of dignity, belonging, safety, and connection to the physical world and our tribes for better or for worse, activate our thinking processes. So nurturing bitterness toward the cultural tribe blocks access to the healing process. So sometimes we're feeling some bitterness toward that tribe, or the foundation that I grew up with. But when we nurture bitterness or hold on to that can block access to a healing power. And what's the truth that we're trying to access? The sacred truth is the idea that all is one. Everyone is my family, and this is Bhakti Yoga. I was telling someone today, Gauravani was on a video from this Rishikesh Kirtan festival they had. Kirtan, what they call it, Festival of Bliss. And this beautiful thing he said that I really loved, he said, "This is like a family reunion with a family that you never knew you had." And I just thought, wow. And that's Bhakti. That's what it's supposed to be, you know? So this idea that the whole world is my family. Every living being is my family. Like Ashley has been saying, how the plants are souls. They're people. They have messages for us. They have healing powers for us, you know? But meanwhile, we're going to burn down the rainforest and, oh my goodness, what are we going to lose, right? So some questions that may come up for us to ponder. What beliefs did I inherit from my parents or my families? Do those belief patterns still have authority in my thinking? Which ones are no longer valid for me? Do I hold superstitions? What's my personal code of honor? And have I compromised my sense of honor? And if so, then what steps have I taken to heal that broken code of honor? Is there any unfinished business with my family? And if so, what prevents you from healing that unfinished business? Sometimes people even seek forgiveness, ask for forgiveness from someone who's passed away. And that's also because the body is not the real self, and the the intention is the real thing. So to seek forgiveness from someone who's already passed away is also very valid, you know? So let's see. What are the blessings that you feel came from your family? What would you like your children to learn from you, from your family, from your roots, that you would like to continue on and not be lost in your generation? And so the alignment may be effective, inspired action without overdoing things, to try to feel more confident, safe, financially secure. And again, the sacred truth is the whole world is one family. In India, in Sanskrit, they call it Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Did I say it right? Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The whole world is connected. Our connection to the feminine spirit of the earth, which is so beautiful, and the community of all humanity. And not only humanity, but every species. You know? Why stop at humanity? And then the invitation to retain the tribal influences in my life that are positive, and just discriminate, right? It's an invitation to our discrimination. What is not serving me well or now, you know? And to pursue a deeper level of truth. So it's really interesting to me that right now, the president of India is actually a tribal woman. She's from a tribe, which is like a Native American person in the U.S. So she's a tribal person from India. Her name is Draupadi Mumu, and she's a devotee of Lord Jagannath. When she swore in to take her oath of office, she said Jai Jagannath. So it was so beautiful, and she was taking shelter of Lord Jagannath when she was sworn in. So how beautiful is that someone like that is being uplifted and validated. So this chakra, I believe the invitation to this chakra is to change inwardly and outgrow certain beliefs that no longer serve us, just in order to strengthen ourselves, strengthen others. It's an invitation to trust that our lives are governed by divine justice over and above human justice. You know, that there's a divine will that's influencing. And it's above shame and blame, right? It's an invitation to live honorably with each other and to trust that God is behind you. Krishna's got my back, right? Even if my life seems to be upside down right now, somehow or other, Krishna's got my back. I don't know if any of you have ever heard the name Alexander Solzhenitsyn. So he wrote a book called Gulag Archipelago. He wrote several books, but he was in the prison camps of Stalin. And, he wrote about the hideous conditions in those prison camps. And here's something from him that I think is very profound. He says, it was only when I lay there on rotting prison straw that I sensed within myself the first stirring of good. So something about this hell brought up something good, some realization of good. He said, gradually it was disclosed to me that the line separating good and evil passes not through parties, states, not between classes, not between political parties either, but right through all human hearts. And then he says, I love this, he goes, so bless you, prison, for having been in my life. Isn't that powerful? Bless you, prison. So the most hellish experience possible became a blessing. Or sometimes we hear this, that cancer changed my life, or if this hadn't happened, this most unfortunate thing that was the most worst thing I could imagine, if that hadn't happened to me, my life wouldn't have changed. So giving a new perspective, right? So I want to also talk about the story of Draupadi, because raise your hand if you know the story of Draupadi. Okay, so a lot of you heard. So Draupadi is this beautiful, fierce, feminine goddess from the described in the Mahabharata, which is the Bhagavad Gita, is the jewel inside the great epic called Mahabharata. So she was an extraordinary woman, extraordinary in all of history because she had 5 husbands. Sometimes you hear about men having more than one wife. She had 5 husbands. How did she get 5 husbands? So she prayed to Lord Shiva, and she said, I want a husband who's the most dharmic and righteous. And he should also be the most strong and powerful. And he should also be the most expert at shooting a bow and arrow. And he should also be the most poetic and the most beautiful. And he should also be very expert at training horses. So Lord Shiva said, well, there's no man like that. There's no one man like that. So you'll have to take 5. So it's a great story. So she had 5 husbands, and so the great Kunti Devi, who I'll speak about in the coming days, was her mother-in-law. So there's a story that, so Arjuna was the one, so these princesses in India would have what they call a Swayamvara, when they would choose their own husband, the princesses. And so her father really wanted her to marry the great Arjuna. So he conjured up a Swayamvara test that only Arjuna could pass, right? He had to shoot, see these fans? So there was a fish spinning from the ceiling from a circular thing. And he had to shoot down and look down into a moving puddle of water to shoot up while looking down in this moving water to shoot the eye of the fish and have this clay fish fall down into the water. Impossible, right? So this was the test, so he could win the hand of the great Draupadi. And okay, so he wins Draupadi, and he's, at the time, they were always having trouble with their evil cousin brothers. So at the time they were living incognito in the forest. They had to, they were sort of, their evil cousins were always trying to usurp the kingdom. So in one of their evil tricks, they made them go out and live incognito in the forest for 13 years. So at this time they were living incognito. So when Arjuna won her at this Swayamvara, they were Kshatriyas, which means the martial class, big muscles and kingly, rulers, the royal order, but they were all dressed like Brahmin priests. So it's like, what? How did these priests win this? Draupadi, she's a princess. How did these guys? Anyway, no one could figure it out. But anyway, so they're taking Draupadi back to this little cottage where they're staying incognito in the forest. And Arjuna calls out to his mother, who is in the cottage, "Mother, I've brought a great treasure." And his mother Kunti, who's always very wise, she's kind of my personal favorite in the Mahabharata. She says, "Well, share it equally with your brothers. You've brought a great treasure. Share it equally with your brothers." So then Draupadi, she becomes the wife of all five, because the mother's words are law and can't be disobeyed. So she said, "You have to share her equally with your brothers." So, oh my God. So she becomes the wife of all five, right? And so they had some system that she would spend one night with one of them, and none of the others could interrupt their brother when she was with them. Somehow they worked it out. Right? But the part of the story that really resonates with me in speaking about this root chakra is that, so she has these 5 most world famous, world amazing husbands. They are her tribe, but her tribe failed her. And here's the next part of the story. So another evil test conjured up by their evil cousins, who are always trying to usurp the kingdom. So in this royal order, when they're challenged to a gambling match, they can't refuse. That's part of the code of honor. So they're challenged to this gambling match. The oldest of the 5 Pandava brothers was very bad at gambling, but he took on this challenge because he's the son of Dharma, the Lord of righteousness, the Lord of Dharma. Each one of them had a divine father. That's another whole story we can talk about. But anyway, so he gets challenged to this gambling match. The dice are loaded. The evil uncle, who's the advisor to the evil cousins, the dice are loaded. They're trick dice. Anyway, they keep losing and losing and losing. They're losing. They lost their crowns. They lost their wealth. They lost everything's in a big pile on the floor. They lost their kingdom. They lost everything. And finally, they lost themselves. They lost themselves. Okay, now we lost ourselves, so now we will be your slaves. We will be the slaves of you evil Kaurava cousins. And then one of the really evil cousin brothers said, "Ha, you still have something else that you're keeping from us. You have your wife Draupadi." And they're like, no. I can't put Draupadi in this gambling match, right? How horrible. So at that time, Draupadi was at the time of her menstruation. So she was in seclusion. Traditionally, women would wear like one single cloth. Their hair would be down. And it was considered a time not of contamination, but a time of when the earth is rejuvenating herself. So this is also about the root chakra. I find it very beautiful. So she's in the women's quarters, and so they say, "Tell her to come." No, everybody, because she's very fiery. Draupadi was born out of fire, actually. She's very fiery. So they send this messenger, one of their servants, to go to the women's quarters and say, "You've been wagered in this bet, and you have to come to the assembly." So this is a big assembly with all the elders and all the kings, and they're doing this gambling in this big assembly with all the royal order present there. And she's like, "I'm not coming there. Are you kidding? They lost me in a bet. Well, go find out. Did they lose themselves first?" did they lose me before they lost themselves? And so she's refusing to come. So then one of the most hideous of these Kaurava brothers decides he's fed up. This servant is not coming. The messenger is not bringing her. So he goes to the women's quarters himself, and he drags her into this assembly, drags her, right? And she's, she's abhorrent. How could this breach of dharma exist in this royal order, And then she starts appealing to the elders, to grandfather Bhishma, who also had a divine birth, who's the wisest of all of them there. How can this breach of righteousness be allowed? She's looking at him. She's looking at Dronacharya, the fighting guru of the Pandavas. She's looking at her husbands. Of course, her eyes are like fire. How dare you? How could you lose me like this? And they're all, because it's all about their honor, right? And they're all just hanging their heads down. So then the intention of these evil cousins was they were going to disrobe her, make her naked in this public assembly. And so this evil Dusasan, such a hideous, like a brute, like, I don't know, have any of you ever been to the Jaipur City Palace and seen, they have the coats of these kings, these rajas, and they're so gigantic. This is even in recent history. These were gigantic people, right? And so we're talking 5,000 years ago. So anyway, so this is a brute. And so he's trying to disrobe her, to insult her honor. So he starts, she's looking around like, how can this happen in this righteous assembly? And, he's pulling her sari, her one cloth that she's wearing, right? He's pulling. And she's like appealing to all of them. Where is dharma? Where is righteousness? Why are you sitting there? Do something. This is her tribe, right? And so, and they're just hanging their heads. They're all at a loss. And then she's trying to keep her sari on herself with her own strength. So this is a gigantic, probably 7-foot brute, and she's, with a woman's strength, trying to keep her, her sari on. And he's like, And so finally, she was a great devotee of Krishna, and she just, she just turns to Krishna. And the way sometimes the story is told that Krishna, meanwhile, was in his kingdom in Dwarka, and because he's the super soul in all living beings, he knows that his devotee is in distress. So he's jumping up to go save his devotee. He's sitting with Rukmini, his queen Rukmini, right? And he jumps up, and then he sits down. He jumps up, and then he sits down. She says, "What are you doing?" He said, "My devotee is in distress, but she's trying to protect herself. So I sit down." She's trying. So this is a lesson for all of us, right? When I can handle it, I can do it by my own strength. So she's trying to protect herself, so he sits down. But then finally she realizes that it's no use, that her only shelter is Krishna. So she puts her hands up in the air, and she's just calling out, "Hey Krishna, hey Govinda." And Krishna, as the story goes, he incarnates and becomes her sari and gives unlimited sari. And the more this hideous person is trying to pull off her sari, the more Krishna is supplying yards and yards and yards, until there's a whole pile of cloth on the floor. And this brute is getting tired, and meanwhile she remains clothed, and her honor is protected. So this is one of the most beautiful, cherished tales from the Mahabharata. So this is, the reason I bring it up here is because her tribe failed her, as so often our tribes failed us. So I think we all bring some goodness from our tribes. I think probably if we went around, and maybe we should do that exercise. What's a good thing? What's a goodness that you carry with you from your parents, from your grandparents, from your tribe? And what are the things that you'd like to sort of jettison in this life? But no, I don't want my children to think like that or to live like that, right?